Hi, I'm McDonnell Liu, and this is the Family Health Lab. I'm really excited to be introducing our next conversation. It's with Jayne Bullen of the Nutrition Network and also the Noakes Foundation and also Eat Better South Africa.
You're listening to the Family Health Lab. Healthy parents, healthy kids.
Hello, hi Jayne. How you going?
Hi, good to hear you.
So we met at the PhD. We were just chatting about that moments ago in 2018, I think.
Can't believe it.
I know it's, that 4 years just feels like forever. But we last chatted during one of your lockdowns during the pandemic at some stage.
Yeah.
How are things there now?
Back to normal life, pretty much. I think there was kind of a time where we all just went back, we demasked now and on we go with life and back to usual. It's really, really been an amazing year this year from that perspective. There was a kind of an overlap period where children were still in masks at schools and then that was dropped and here we are and things are good. Life's back on. And of course it's not, I think it's been such an extraordinary time. It's like everything's changed and nothing's changed. The issues are still here that we're facing and fighting and grappling with, and everyone's lives have changed so much and people have lost so much in this pandemic. So interesting time to be back to normality or trying to get there at least.
I think that time highlighted for many people quality of life and what was important and values. And it highlighted the chronic disease and the ill health that we're facing. I just wanted to touch on your low carb journey, which was not a long time ago, really, wasn't it? And,
yes.
And I know you were diagnosed quite young with, was it pre-diabetes or diabetes?
So when I was 21, I was told by a very, very progressive, when I think back, a gynae that I had PCOS, which I didn't realize at the time. And that led me down the path of understanding and figuring out the root cause, which is insulin resistance. And it took me some time. And back then, people didn't really know what that was. And they didn't understand how to treat it. And neither did I. I mean, it took me 15, 20 years to actually figure out the route to the right treatment protocol for myself. And that was, of course, the driver of my journey and the work that I now do was to help others that have kind of reached this point where there isn't much medical support or not medical support. There isn't much there aren't any answers and there aren't really any medications that will help you to find health. And then you obviously have to go on the inevitable journey of figuring it out for yourself. And luckily, 20 years later, there's a lot more support. There's a lot more actual science that explains this better.
It's been amazing, the change that I've seen over the 10 years that I've been interested and involved in following low carb or keto diets. So for you to be in that space and kind of working this out, you've seen such growth. And like you say, we must have been very advanced for polycystic ovary syndrome because, medical professionals are still coming to that.
The research is catching up with the anecdotal knowledge that we've now seen across ourselves, potentially our children, our family members, or maybe thousands in our case in the work that we do, where we look at, kind of multiple case studies. And of course, then science takes a bit of time to, validate that and analyze it in a very, very meaningful and robust way. But what we know for sure is that we don't have all that time to wait, I think. And that was my big dilemma was I wanted to live a fit and healthy, happy life, particularly when I became a mom. It was like really important for me then to actually, survive and not just survive, but to be able to kind of go up mountains with my son and be present as an active parent. And I was heading on the trajectory where that wasn't necessarily possible at that point. And that was where the call really came to actually start doing like a lot more work in this area to help others that are on that same trajectory, which we know are millions. I mean, in South Africa, 61% of women are obese, which is terrifying. That's not how it should be.
It's a frightening statistic. 61% obese.
61%.
No, that's terrible. That's really, really high rate.
That's moms. It's people like us that are doing the right thing and eating what they're told to, which is what I did for 20 years. I was told that back then I was given the GI, the low GI thing, and I memorized it. I remember putting like 3 or 4 teaspoons of fructose into my coffee and being like, I'm doing the right thing because it's fructose, it's low GI, which we now know is actually one of the drivers of fatty liver disease, for example. And off I went like this confidently on this grain-based, very, very low animal fat, animal product, nearly no fat diet for 15 years. And I just got worse and worse and worse and worse progressively.
As you say, lots of people are still doing that. And so getting the information out there through your work, through your organizations and through others' work is just so important, because, we can't wait for the government policies. We have to kind of take action. So did I read this right? But you were the first employee for the Noakes Foundation. Was that correct?
Yes. So that was where it all began, was I was the first person that the Noakes Foundation employed. And it was really very much a dream that we, the Noakes family and Propton Noakes had to find a way to make good of what he had been through, and share it. That was where it all began, was going, okay, how are we going to actually take this knowledge? And Prop Noakes is an amazing person because he's an extraordinarily exceptional human being. And when he does something, he does it perfectly and he does it well and he's committed. So he did that with low carb, or what we call banting here. He just said, that's it. I'm type 2 diabetic. And it's obvious to me now as a scientist, I see the reality of what I've been doing wrong and I'm going to do it. And he reversed his diabetes completely, or remitted it, to the point that it's now been, I think it's been about 12 years since his diagnosis, and his father died terribly 10 years after diagnosis with type 2 diabetes. And he is now, I would argue, probably the healthiest he's been in potentially his whole life. He's got a very, very low fasting insulin. His HbA1c is fully under control. So he became an example to certainly to me, and I know to many, potentially millions, of somebody that can actually reverse their diabetes and change the entire outlook of their lives ultimately by doing something radical that doesn't involve stepping into the kind of pharmaceutical medical route. And I know you've been through this journey yourself with Leafy and with your own family. It's like often at the point of diagnosis, which is a terrible time in anyone's life, is to be diagnosed with a condition, whether it's an aggressive condition or a chronic condition. You are faced with a set of decisions that you have to make. And typically we are pushed into the mainstream decision-making channel, which is medication. I mean, I know I'm on a weight loss group for children in the USA, and the prevalent treatment for obesity at the moment, children between the ages of 7 and 15, does seem to be bariatric surgery. That seems to be the way people are going, And that's absolutely without judgment. People are doing what they're presented with, which is my child's not okay, my child's sick, my child's morbidly obese and crying every day because they're being teased and they can't run up the hill and all of these things. They can't fit into the uniform, which are such terrible, difficult things for a mother to deal with and for a parent to deal with. And of course, then we do what is evidence-based and what is recommended by our doctors who we love and trust and believe in. And that's the tragedy of our times, is that medical professionals have also been doing what they believe to be right. And unfortunately, it hasn't worked. And they've had to find alternative ways themselves. And that's where we come in, as we support, in whatever ways that we can. We train doctors and dietitians and healthcare workers to bring this knowledge in and to give people an alternative. It's not to say it's kind of revolutionary in the sense of like, drop all of the, all the advice you've ever been given. But in some cases, unfortunately, it is the necessary route to take to heal.
As you mentioned, I've been in the low carb space for a little while, with my own journey, with my family, with my nutrition work. And I'm still surprised that when you say that the children and the parents are going that route and that's so prevalent, those type of things upset me, and they're pretty frightening to hear about. It's worrying. That's why the work that you're doing through the Noakes Foundation, but also the two other organizations that you lead. So I don't know how you do it all. Eat Better South Africa and the Nutrition Network. It's just, I can't state how important it is. Can you tell me a little about the highlights? Has it been an 8-year journey around that?
I'm going into year 9. And I would say the highlights are really, it's been an evolving journey. And it's like as the science presents itself to us and we realize more and more how important this work is and this knowledge is, we've gone, and our first thing was we said, well, we have to share this locally in our country, South Africa. Things are dire here. There isn't public health care really accessibly available to people in a way that can support them with chronic disease. So we've got excellent world-class private healthcare in South Africa, but about 86% of our country doesn't have private healthcare. They rely on the state. And what that means, so for example, if you're diabetic, is you go every 3 months and you get a glucose test done. And the nurse at the clinic says to you, oh, your sugars have gone up from 8 to 14. Like, here's some more medication, off you go. And what we're seeing is people dying. They're just they're being put on a path towards early death, ultimately. So what we did with Eat Better South Africa was we just tried very basically to intervene and to support people to change their diet. And obviously now it's become a movement. I don't lead it entirely anymore. We've got an incredible woman this year that joined us that is kind of taking it on and steering the ship, Yvette Ziharwa. And she comes from the community that it's most importantly impacting. So and she also is an early childhood development expert. So her knowledge in bringing it into how are we going to get the next generation better? So of course, if I'm 44, I've made metabolic mistakes for up to 20 years, and it's difficult for me now to repair that. But what we would like to see is that our children don't have to go down the same route, given the knowledge that we have now. So what are we putting in place in terms of how kids are going to eat into the future? And I know that's a huge part of the work that you do in the world is, fixing it. It's like, we've got to fix the future. We are responsible for the future generations of life on Earth. And it's kind of our job to at least leave them, if not a little bit better off, at least not worse. And what we're seeing now is worse. So we're seeing children under the age of 7 diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're seeing rampant childhood obesity or malnutrition. The problems are immense. And we're also seeing an immense onslaught of mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, and ODD, ADD type of things very early on, which we haven't seen in the past. And we know those to be the impacts of poor metabolic health. So that was our job and our mandate to Eat Better South Africa. And then as the years went on, what we didn't have were referring doctors and healthcare workers. And we started to go, there's a problem here. We're going to have to train people that we can trust to go and run a program. We can send a patient to, we can't, we as in like Tim Noakes to a large extent was actually being hounded by the thousands and thousands of South Africans that had all these medical questions. And then we had a little list of doctors who were sort of low carb doctors. So what Nutrition Network did was it said, this is a solution for South Africa, but what it turned out to be was a solution that actually the world needed. And very quickly we went from being a local training business to a largely North American and Australian. Actually, Australia is our number 2 country, and then South Africa's number 3. So we kind of, we filled a gap that was missing in the educational area in healthcare. And what we see now is we've offered a community and fellowship, or I like to call it kinship, for medical practitioners that want to help their patient.
Those few and far between doctors around the world were isolated and often they were scared, to do something different from the norm. So you've shored that up. You've provided the research, which you're undertaking, and often I'm seeing that come out, a new study, and you're demonstrating effectiveness of low carbohydrates or carbohydrate restriction. And then you're giving the tools and then the community to shore each other up and support and then find a practitioner. So it's mainly for medical practitioners, but also for health coaches and nutritionists and dietitians. So you've got a whole range of different modules and different courses there. Keto, low carb. I've just seen, what have I just seen?
Addiction.
Addiction is coming. Addiction's coming soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
In 2 days' time, actually, we're launching. So the evolution, actually, it's nice to just mention that is what we started saying was, okay, we have to train only healthcare, which is doctors and dietitians and a couple of specialists. And then sort of 2 years in, it was obvious that there was a huge need for coaches, or what we call advisors. And that person it's somewhere, it's a you and a me that is, well, actually, no, I don't know. You might well be actually a healthcare worker. So I could be incorrect.
I'm a nutritionist, and a lot of what I do is, it's the motivation and the support and the accountability. So it's, just to interrupt a moment, but people don't just need the pamphlet. They don't just need the website. They're unpicking decades and decades of their nutrition patterns and their behaviors, their habits, all of their learning and all of their environment and their culture. So it's that coach level is really, really important as well.
And that's exactly what's, that's it. It's exactly it. It's the fact that the work that we're doing as a community is we're changing ancestral eating to some extent. So we're changing the things that our parents taught us to eat and we thought were healthy, and we're changing habits. And that's why this new module, Addictive Eating, is actually so important. And it's taken us some time to really realize it is, you can change a person's diet, but they are still hooked into their old habits. And when something goes wrong in their life, they slip up and then they're back there. They're back there with the tub of ice cream or whatever it is that satiates them emotionally. And particularly with COVID, I don't know anyone that didn't have some challenges with their eating habits during COVID, because there was so much disrupt. It was the perfect opportunity to see what it is that our little weakness areas are and to see if we fall back into them, which most people did. And that's wonderful. Wonderful to have these setbacks, because then you can really work on yourself. And that's what coaches are there for. And civil society is doing the job of change. It's a 20-year process. So it means policymakers, government, coaches, healthcare, everyone, moms, religious leaders. We all have to understand food because it's such an intrinsic part of our lives. And we have to understand what the reasons are for the food that we eat to be making us unwell. Mm-hmm. And that's the tragedy of our times is, that particularly a lot of cultural food, a lot of emotionally connected and important food for people is the thing that's actually the worst for them. And in South Africa, we have an amazing example of that, which is a lot of our indigenous people in South Africa call it cultural or traditional food. And it's a thing called pap, which is a maize-based porridge, highly refined white porridge. Pap didn't come into the country or into Africa until the Portuguese colonists brought it here on ships to feed animals. But marketeers have done the most incredible job in the last sort of 50 to 100 years of positioning it as like the grandmother's porridge. So when we take people off pap, they say, it's my traditional food. Like, I'll never go off that, because they believe that this is their traditional food. But actually, when you look back, it's absolutely not. It wasn't here.
That's interesting. I suppose that's, what do we have an equivalent? I mean, worldwide, like if you mention for the first time to somebody who has no idea and hasn't looked into this area, that cereals, and particularly the healthier, the whole grain varieties of cereals, are not so good for their blood sugar levels or the metabolic health, or it might be that one of the barriers for their weight loss, why they're plateauing, why they're not shifting. That's such an alien concept. It's like,
let's not even talk about the healthy things. I worked in an office in the UK, and if you tried to tell people Jaffa cakes shouldn't be on the menu, it's like vegetable boycott. It was a disaster.
I was in a doctor's surgery like a couple of months ago, and they're handing around sweets to patients, and the patients were saying, "Oh no, thanks," and the nurse and the doctor were insisting. So like, no cake, the meat.
Yes, the alphabet is donuts, of course. In America, in North America, it's like. It seems to be like a part of any kind of civil servant's job in North America that they must have donuts as like a celebratory, These are difficult things to change. These are things that are really part of our joy and satiety experience in life. And this is where food is so contentious and so interesting, is because we, celebrate with food. We associate good times in our lives with eating.
We pick ourselves up and we console ourselves and we bond with food. So there's so much unpicking. When you were talking about Eat Better South Africa, and you were saying that your focus is your focus is programs and outreach programs and supporting people to learn and to educate and empower them, which is amazing. You were also mentioning the children, that you're kind of going to be focusing on that area. Did I read in the past that most of those programs that you've been running to date have been with women.
Yes.
And is that on purpose because they are the holders of that information, or is that just how it works out?
It was purely incidental. So we would find a community that was open to doing one of these programs, and we'd go in and have an open introductory session where we would, typically take their blood sugar and share this knowledge. And there would always be about 60 women that would show up and maybe 1 or 2 men. And we never said to the men, you're not welcome. So most of our programs have had between 1 and 5 men that have done it with amazing results. I mean, they've been kind of the celebrities of the show to some extent. But it does typically end up being women. Certainly in Indigenous communities in South Africa, we know that 1 woman feeds on average 11 people in a township, for example, and impacts. When 1 woman makes a dietary change or a cooking change, it impacts up to 11 or more people in that community. So it's been the way that we've approached things. But absolutely, I mean, what we know is that adopting a low carbohydrate diet really works best for men quickest. As we've seen, and we have this with couples all the time as they both start on a keto diet and the man looks like he did when he was 18, sort of a month or 2 later, and the woman's still struggling metabolically. And that's important because I think what we've learned over the years is there's no one immediate, obvious answer for everyone. And that's certainly been my journey is I had to really, I've still a continued journey. So I'm nowhere at the point that I'd like to be. It's very much a journey of figuring out what works for me in that moment and how to bring it in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah. And I'd echo that. Being a family with a daughter on a keto diet 10 years and our son, we started him on a low carb diet beforehand, although I hadn't realized it was low carb at the time, it was part of the gut healing. But I'd still say we're still on the journey, and at different ages, it's so different. And, your son's a little older, he's a teenager. My son is just heading there, but he's acting like a teenager. And every different age brings new challenges. So how do you navigate having a teenage son with the food culture and the food environment that we're faced with? And they particularly children are bombarded from every single angle and every outing, every time they leave the house.
Very difficult for moms. I think that's my first point, is to be kind on yourself and on your family, and not to, I mean, it's incredible to be perfect. We all want to aim for perfection. And in an instant like what you've had with Leafy, where it's a life or death situation, it is totally different. But what I've learned over the years with my son is to be more inclusive of his needs. And also to acknowledge, I wrote it down, it's the only word I wrote down in prep for this, was to acknowledge the importance of kinship as a human being. So if you're living in a society where a profoundly sick society, which is where most of us live, we don't want to be sick. We want our children to be healthy and well. And that means that they have to eat differently to their peers. And at some point, I mean, my son was on kind of organic food for as long as I could control him. And then he started swapping it in for chocolates, with friends and doing things, and then making his own money and making the most terrible choices in my eyes, devastating to me. But he's an incredibly socially adapted, healthy, fit, metabolically well human being. And for him, he's made the choice to live, not on a very strict low carb diet, but to include things and to, do what his friends do. So if he goes to a party, he eats what his friends eat because he's part of that community, and he will not be the child that's got a little separate lunchbox. So that's part of it is educating our kids as to how to make the right choices, but also not isolating them. He started at a new school 2 years ago, and the teacher, I didn't put sandwiches into his lunchbox ever. But the teacher sent a little message back saying, your son's lunchbox needs a sandwich. It needs the bread. So I spent spiritual nonsense for bread. And they felt like I'd failed on the carb, the pyramid.
We need the whole grains. Come on.
And that's fine. I mean, that's fine. It's we are living in profoundly sick times, and we would like to be perfect. And I do have some colleagues and friends that are perfect with their children. They've found a way to live in a way that actually really, really actually keeps their children out of the mainstream junk diet. But that's your choice. And as a mom, you have to find the balance. And you want to have emotionally healthy child that knows how to live in the world, and actually be at that office party with the adults and maybe have a quarter of the donut, but not have to eat the entire box. And to find that balance. And if they manage that now, and we teach them well how to do that now, then they won't get diabetic, hopefully.
Yes. And as you said, I mean, I love that word kinship, because I'm being tested with, what I think my son's really appalling choices are But a long time ago, when I was discussing nutrition and food, I was talking to another nutritionist, and she was saying that her stance was say your children to leave home at 16 or 18, never let them have any sugar, any candy, anything. And I was also thinking it's a balance, and you're raising somebody to make choices and to be an individual. So and that's a lot of, I think, what we all do in the nutrition space and the low carb space is help people navigate these ups and downs and these difficult situations. And it's hard for families who are really trying to kind of rein it in for their children's health. It counts. It's really challenging. What are your thoughts then on the state of food, just generally the food environment, our food culture, the direction it's going? It's a big question, but is it ever going to get any better? What do you think?
Honestly, I think at this stage, you have to figure out what works for you, and you have to fight to create a lifestyle and a diet that's going to be healthy for your ecosystem. So for me, that has meant I don't live in the city anymore. I live out of town in a place where there's farmers markets and where I can get affordable organic foods. I don't think that I get them in the retail environment in South Africa. And I think that where we're heading is a very gray area where pharmaceutical and food are merging. And that is hugely problematic. And we already see it in the strategies that we're seeing in store. So pharmacies are now moving into retail outlets, certainly in South Africa. I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia. And that's connected to convenience. But it's becoming problematic for consumers to actually figure out what it is that they should eat and what's healthy. And that's the problem. I call it greenwashing or green flagging.
That PAP that you mentioned earlier, and the cereals and the certain bread and whole grain products, lots of health washing, and people trying to do the best and looking at the tick on the side of the box and getting, trying their best, but not having the right information and so not being able to make good decisions around food. What is the big aim? Because you've already you've grown so much, you're making such an impact internationally. What do you have an ultimate aim that's like a real wish that you're aiming for?
Our vision is to try and find a way to get our information to everyone in the world that needs it. So we're already in almost all countries in the world in some small way. And that means just getting it to patients ultimately, through the medical and practitioner community that we operate in. And beyond that, it's to really just positively impact human health and give people the power of choice again, which is a big lofty aim, but we are getting there through one practitioner and one patient and ultimately one meal at a time.
I did hear you say in a talk, I was listening to some talks of yours, and I did hear you say that if you're having a good day, it's when you've helped somebody locally. Is that the thing that really sparks your joy and kind of keeps you motivated? Because it's a big task. You're taking on so much.
I think that for me, one of the most motivating things is actually seeing the stories that come back to us of how people's lives have changed by making simple changes. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing. And the real deal is to look at the community of children and say, how are we going to positively impact their lives? And is their life getting better through the work that we do? So we've just started a 2-year study that looks at cognitive behavioral change in children. You would love this actually, which is just by supplementing them with 2 bowls with what I called pup earlier, but basically 2 bowls of porridge a day, healthier porridge than what they're eating, but not perfect. So it's a porridge that is affordable and that is achievable to roll out nationally in South Africa. And that is through Eat Better South Africa. So it's not a keto porridge. It's got a better balance, but not a perfect balance. And we're looking at that over 2 years to see how this works and if we can do it to a larger scale. So I think it's about 200 children that'll be doing this study, which is an important one because in 2 years' time, we're going to have a set of data, which I'm pretty sure will be, if it's not been convincing enough so far with all of the data that's been presented, but convincing to local healthcare that this is a very simple change that we can make to get people's lives better. The simple things often make a big difference when you're looking at the gross population of a country.
A lot of what we're talking about, I think when we talk about carbohydrate restriction, low carb, keto, research and evidence and all of that. It sounds off-putting. I think it sounds complex, but loads of these are simple solutions. And by upping fiber and kind of changing the dietary content, you can make an enormous difference. So I am really excited to follow that and see the progress. I mean, that's the thing that really, I absolutely love. And I think that's where my passion is, the children and kind of the next generation, making those contributions, because it's just sad what we're heading towards.
It's really sad. But my thing, and this is why we called our brand, our charity, Eat Better, is because that's really what it's about. It's going, okay, here's my family's meal. What can I do to give them a little bit better? It doesn't have to be perfect to be better, to improve the health of a person. We don't have to give up everything. We don't have to be perfect. We can still have the small bowl of ice cream sometimes if we need to, if that's what's working for us and we're not metabolically ill. And we can find ways to integrate healthier foods into our diet. It's actually quite simple.
We don't have to always aim for perfection. We don't have to put people off by saying it's this or nothing. And it's different solutions for different people, but a lot of people don't need perfection. They need steps of improvement. And that would make a massive difference to chronic disease and metabolic health and preventing children going that way. I wanted to ask as well, you're leading and steering these 3 incredible organizations, and you've got your own interests as well, and you're a mum and a teenager. So how do you shore yourself up? How do you maintain your energy levels and take care of you? Do you have practices?
I do. So I live in nature. I'm on the mountain or on the beach often. I do yoga as much as I can. I move my body every day and exercise. And I've found something called mind-body medicine, which is really focused on the core of it, and the principle of it is breath and meditation. And I found that to be profoundly impactful on supporting me with my own life and my own kind of balance. But a core part of it is something called mindful eating, which is really just about bringing consciousness to the way that we eat and slowing down and becoming much more aware of what's going into our mouth. And that's been a key piece for me, is to really just start to actually experience how my own body reacts beyond the science, beyond the thought process, just to really ignore that all and notice what's going on for me. So that's the journey I'm on at the moment, is just to be very, very aware of what works for me on a very subtle level.
That's lovely. And the nature side of things, you often posts of nature, and I just think that's beautiful. Obviously a big part of you feeling grounded and energized, and I think that's really, really important to shore you up so that you're able to take care of all that's going on, that you're putting into the world. Do you have projects in terms of that mind-body medicine that you're putting out there that people kind of find out more about?
I offer online groups that are usually at very little or no charge for people that can be supported by it. And that is really and again, the thing about mind-body medicine is it focuses on kinship. So it's group therapy to some extent. It's talking and it's meeting with people that hold you accountable and that hold you in a space of healing and health. So that's the work that I'm doing at the moment, but in between everything else, and trying to also bring it into the work that we do. I think we've all realized that habit change and body-based awareness is becoming increasingly more important. When we look at what's going on out there in the food systems that we've talked about, and in the retail environment and the pharmaceutical environment, the only thing we really have is our ability to come back into this body and to really look after it in the best way that we can in this lifetime. And that's a huge task. So that's the work that I'm doing, is trying to find ways to just bring that awareness, which is deeply simple and deeply obvious, but very, very easy to forget.
I do think that being in the nutrition space and talking about nutrition all the time, a lot of the time, focusing on macros and types of foods and food replacements and evidence, that we can really miss the obvious, that someone can't change their diet if they're not in a good place. And, the steps, nutrition is, I believe it's a foundation for good health, but, maybe there's a step you need to be in your body and feel good in your mindset before you're able to to take sustainable changes. So yeah, I think that sounds lovely and good for you and good for the people you're supporting.
Thank you.
And then to close, do you have any tips or what steps would you suggest for somebody who, either from your professional or your personal mind body medicine, somebody wants to get started today and start to change or improve their health? Is there anything they could implement, say, straight away?
So obviously the first thing is to find a way to change your macros in your diet, to cut out the junk. I mean, that's the obvious and we know it, but that it can be easier said than done. So what I like to say to people is that they have to go a little bit further back sometimes and look at what happened in their lives when they started to change. So, was there a shock or a trauma? Was there something that happened that came long before their disease appeared? So by disease, I mean whether it's weight gain or obesity or type 1 diabetes late in life. Almost every adult late onset type 1 diabetic that I meet, when I start to talk to them about their lives, they mention a major trauma a year or two before. Mm-hmm. And we know this in the autoimmune disease category too. It's like these things come after we've been through a trauma or a huge disrupt in our lives, which I can't say I know anyone who hasn't been through that in the last couple of years. So it's a really important time to take stock of what's going on for you emotionally, and why, if you've got a disease that's related to overeating, of course you need to change your diet. It's kind of obvious, but before that, you have to understand why your diet's changed, led you to the point where you need to change your diet, because it's not going to work if you just go, I'm cutting out carb. Well, no, because you're eating for other reasons, which may be emotional, they may be addictive, they may be to calm or sort of support you through trauma. They may be, allergic. Well, you've got to dig a little bit deeper. Just doing your diet doesn't work. We've proven that time and time again.
Yes, it's not as simple as follow this and off we go. Otherwise, the work would be done. But that's really interesting, that digging and taking stock, kind of you're raising awareness of what's been happening for you. So that's really important. Is there a particular resource you'd like to leave people with, either a book or a particular talk or any type of resource you find important that they could reach for?
There's so many, but I do think that our recent module that we released at the Nutrition Network, I think it should be very affordable. I believe it's under $50. If it's not, please write to me and we can send you a coupon if you need it for any amount. It's called Resilience, and it's really about just taking stock of your mental health and looking at things like burnout and emotional eating and addiction. There's a little bit touched. There's a touch of addiction in there. Or addictive eating, addictive behavioral, compulsive eating is perhaps the best word to describe it. So people don't associate themselves with an addict, but if you are requiring sugar to get through the day, then you need to be looking at those things and looking at how to be resilient. And there's some beautiful tools in there which are connected to breath and connected to how to work with the relationships in your life. And so many other resources. I mean, it's kind of up to you to figure out what, but I have an amazing app that's actually paid. It's the only app I've ever paid for. It's called the Daily Calm on my phone. And it's really simple. It has like a 6-minute meditation every day and then some motivational tips and then a couple of other things and beautiful music. It's just a little easy technological hook into kind of connecting to how to stay centered. You open it, it says, take a deep breath now while it's loading. So it just gives you these little cues. And there's so many like that. There's so many opportunities now to actually really plug into being more connected to your essence. And that leads to eating better.
And you're able to make them. And not just at the set time, you're able to sustain yourself. And that's, I find that we're having a conversation about nutrition and you're leading 3 nutrition organizations, but there's so many different pieces to the puzzle. Otherwise it would all be done. So yeah, I think they're much needed tools. And it's really interesting to hear what helps you in your day. But thank you for talking with me.
Thank you so much. It's always so lovely to see you and to chat to you, Claire. Thank you for all the beautiful work you do and how you inspire me and so many. Thank you so much.